Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Sisto Says, powered by Design 2147, a New York City building and code expediting firm. I'm here today with Steve Shishko from New Age Engineering.
Pleasure.
Steve, pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much.
So, as always, when we start the show, it's, I always talk about how I met you or met my guests. And Steve was introduced to me through my partner, Dominic. I have met his brother before, who's in the construction world as well. And Steve and I got to chatting. And Steve's specialty, which he'll fill us in a little bit about, is the boiler world and here in New York City. Kind of fond to me because, as I had told you when we first met, way back in the day, this firm filed thousands of boilers, thousands. And today, when we talk about boilers, we have a lot of things to talk about because of fuel. Can we get gas? We're not going to get gas. We have oil. We shouldn't use oil. Local Law 97's around the corner, So I invited you in to give us a little bit about, tell my guests a little bit about what's going on in the boiler world. Tell us a little bit about yourself. And, no one just wakes up and goes, hey, I think I'm going to wake up and file and design boilers in New York City. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what your company does.
Yeah, so I went to Hofstra University in Long Island, and when I was graduating with an engineering degree, it was a year before I graduated, and I started getting nervous, as I'm sure most people do, about what I'm going to do for work, how I'm going to get a job. And I had a summer where one of the professors had a contact for me. He said, hey, I have a person who needs an engineer. And I saw it was in construction, and it wasn't the way I was going. I didn't really want to do that. And I had an interview with a company called Electronics Inc., and they did some cool work. So they baked circuit boards to send them out in satellites into space.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, this is what I want to do. I went in for the interview. I got interviewed by a bunch of PhDs, and I was like, this is what I want. I needed a job for the summer. I've never, ever not had a job for a summer. And I didn't hear from him for 2 weeks. And I was like, oh, well, okay, maybe I didn't get it. So I applied for a small boutique engineering firm that did New York City construction. And the guy called me. He said, hey, come on in. Like, the next day. He's like, don't worry about getting dressed up, anything, just come on in. So I still put on a suit because I can't show up to an interview without it. And I went in, I interviewed with him, and he offered me a job on the spot. I worked the summer there, and he offered me a full-time position as soon as I graduated. And the funny part is, a week after I started, I got the job position at Electronics Inc.
Oh, wow.
And I said, no, I've already committed. I can't, back out of what I already did.
It's funny how fate plays a role in everything.
It was wild. It was really crazy.
And this firm specialized in boilers. Is that really what they did?
So that was the core competency, was getting mostly code compliance, but also design and specification work, getting the boilers filed, permitted, making sure that there was anything that would come up during an inspection that we could let them know. So holes in the boiler room, things needing to be fire stopped.
Sure. So it's not just the boiler, it's the entire enclosure.
The entire system.
Right. And now the chimneys are a big deal.
So, absolutely.
So always in the last, probably the last 4 or 5 episodes, maybe more, Local Law 97 comes up.
Oh, yeah.
And a big part of that is, discussions you and I have had off the air, but now that we're on the air, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Sure. I'm going to throw some questions out to you. So the other day, I had a Q&A with a Local Law 97 expert. And there's two sets of kind of in the residential world. We'll stay out of the commercial and the manufacturing world. But in the residential world, if you have a affordable building and it's less than 25,000 square feet, you're pretty much exempt. Yeah. If you have 25,000, you have to do this 13-step checklist. Mm-hmm. And most of it's like pretty easy stuff. Change all your light bulbs to LED, go to your boiler, change these settings, set your thermostats to this way so that you start to get to the levels and the rating that you need. But the big thing is they want everything to be electric. They, meaning the government, right? The state, as part of, and New York City, as part of Local Law 97. So we have thousands of buildings that have boilers that are run on gas or oil. And, you and I talked about it. It costs X to run it on oil or gas now. And if you rip it out and you put condensers on and you put split units in and you run electricity because they're all going to be electric, and you tear up these apartments and you do all of these things, how, yes, it will be energy efficient because we won't be burning fossil fuels, but the cost for these conversions seems to be where a lot of the pushback is coming, because landlords aren't going to be, and tenants that are in these co-ops and condos are not going to be able to afford all of this work. So, what are you seeing since you file so many boilers? Do you see people saying, nah, I'm not going to put a boiler, I'm just going to put in, split units now?
So there's a whole lot to unpack with Local Law 97. And we do a lot of the work with the lower income buildings with only those checklists, like radiant barriers behind all of their radiators to make them a bit more efficient.
Correct.
Controls on your boilers, just really making sure that everything...
It's about optimizing the system.
Optimizing and knowing where your fuel's going, right?
Right.
So that sensors and things like that have become a really big portion of this. And the conversations have not been that great with owners with us. We've spoken with them pretty extensively about these Local Law 97s because it comes to the point where they need to replace their boiler. And they say, well, is there an electrification option? And we said, there's always an option, and it's time and money. Like, how much do you want to spend, and how long are you willing to give to this project?
Are you willing to wait the 6 years or do it now?
Yeah.
I mean, that's really the $1 million question. If you spend X now and put another fuel oil or gas, operated boiler, you're only going to get 6 years out of it, because maybe by 2030, if they don't change it, you're going to have to pull it out or convert anyway. So the question then becomes, is it worth doing it now, or is it worth just biting the bullet and going to electric?
So there's a couple things right now. Is these heat pumps, they've been around, but we still don't know if there's a better efficient model coming about in the next few years,
Right.
Better controls, just more way, like a better way of doing electrification than there is right now. And I walked a building not long ago with an owner, and we spoke about it because he's at the point where he needs to replace his it's a 250 horsepower boiler. So we walked on the roof, and he says, well, is there anything that we could do? And I said, yeah. I said, we can run a condenser farm all over your roof. Then we can run refrigerant lines and pretty much put central AC in every apartment to provide heating and cooling.
Right.
And you have to be prepared to put steel all over your roof, put condensers on the
Right. You
roof.
can't put it...
Yeah. Then renovate apartments as you go along.
Because you got to punch through. You got to find shafts. You got to create shafts. You got to... Every opening, every apartment needs to have... And then you got to pull electricity, and you probably got to upgrade your
Yes.
panels.
And that's the big piece too. And then running a whole new electrical line upstairs, disconnect switches for each one. And my biggest concern is with these newer VRF systems is when I ask people, what's the useful life on this? Like, when do we need to replace?
Yeah, there's probably 15 years,
About
17 years or
yeah,
whatever.
They say 15 to 20, and when I hear 15 to 20, I think 15.
Right.
So,
I think 10, but you're a lot more optimistic than me, Steve.
So you can put one steel boiler in your basement. The steel boiler provides steam or hot water, whatever
Right.
that is. That steel boiler should last you 25 years, and that's consistent across the board. And really, I've seen boilers that are 30, 35 years and still kicking.
Listen, we talk about time, right? So, I moved up to Stamford, Connecticut 26 years ago. And my cousin was a plumber, and he went into town and he got a permit. And I have an oil-fired, single-family home. And he told me to buy the best boiler with the best burner in it. And I did. And he said, it will outlast as long as you live here. And knock wood, I'm on my 26th year.
Wow.
And of course you have little things with it, but the boiler itself lasted forever. My parents had houses in Astoria where the boilers were 40 or 50 years old. They changed the burners to make them more efficient, but
Yep.
the boiler body, there's not much more efficiency. I'm not an engineer, but I'm assuming that the steel body and the cast iron body of the boiler hasn't changed much.
I tell my guys, it's a big tea kettle.
That's it.
That's all it is. It's a big
it's
tea
just
kettle.
boiling up some water.
That's it. And they do have, instead of the 3-pass, you could do 4-pass and things like that to boost the efficiency points a bit. But the burner is really the big piece. Getting your proper air to fuel ratios and, all of that.
Is there an option with the new biofuel that's coming out that you can continue to use an oil-fired boiler, but with a synthetic oil now that is not harsh to the environment, and it's not recycled oil, but it's basically a man-made oil product?
I'll be honest, I haven't heard too much about it.
Yeah, I've been reading a lot about that they're trying to create fuels that are
Like a biodiesel? I mean, I know about biodiesels taking commercial grease and kind of converting that into a diesel.
Because that's really just converting it. It's
Yes.
just recycling it.
Correct.
But now they're talking about creating synthetic things that you could burn. So again, you made a great point, Steve, that I really didn't think about, but you're 100% right about something that I completely didn't think of. Well, today you got a Mitsubishi split unit or a Samsung or a Dayton, and it's got this technology in it. By the time that law comes into effect in 6 years from now, the technology could be 100 times better.
Yeah.
So people are going to put it in. They put it in now, and then all of a sudden they change the law. They're going to rip them out and put in new ones. It's going to be crazy.
Well, I think about it from maintenance, maintaining one boiler versus 40 condensers on your roof.
Without a doubt. And all the filters.
Are you going to sub-meter? And
all the
owner,
drains.
The owner of that building brought up a point that I hadn't even thought about. And he goes, what happens to this project if one tenant refuses to allow us into their apartment to put in a split
Can't
system?
do it.
And that's a
Gotta go to court.
You said, yeah, it's going to be a legal battle because now you still have to run your steam boiler to provide radiator heat just for that one apartment, but 56 other ones. So
Great
absolutely.
point.
And that, to me, was such a scary idea.
Great point. And I know for a fact that I had Ethan on. That the relationship between landlords and tenants is a really, really big part of being a successful, management company and running your management department. It's easy for someone to say, "I don't want the dust and dirt in my apartment."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like you said, so now you did
30
30 of them, and 2 of them you can't do. You got to leave your boiler in place because they got no heat.
When he said that, I said, we're going to have to be ready to battle this out. I don't know of any other way. And, you get 56 people in a room and get them all to agree on one thing.
Wow, very tough.
I mean, I've never seen it. And that's not even 56 people. That's 56 tenants. That could be multiple people. I mean, to me, that's a huge uphill battle for any multifamily.
Now, how has the technology changed in the boiler world? What's like the biggest thing that you've seen over, you seem like a pretty young man,
Yeah.
but you've been around a while.
The funniest thing was when I really started getting into the energy, I got the CEM license and I started looking into the boiler controls, was that boilers operated off of outside temperature and return water, and that's it.
That was it.
And you think about that now and it sounds insane, but that was just the way things were done.
Right, if it's 32 outside and the water's coming back at X, there
Turn
you
it
go.
on.
Turn
And
it
then
on.
now, I mean, if you don't have a sensor that's connected to the internet with sensors throughout your building connected
Right.
to Wi-Fi, to me, it's a foolish way to operate your boiler. It'll pay itself back. There's incentives from Con Edison to install it. At this point, if you don't have that single control panel in your boiler room, there's a bunch of companies that do it.
Yeah.
And that alone, now you're working off of the average inside temperature of these buildings.
Right, not one isolated room in one place.
And you say it out loud, and all of a sudden it goes, wow, that makes all the sense in the
course,
world.
yeah, well, listen, just remember when we were, I say when we were kids. When I was a kid, we lived in a 2-family house in Astoria, and all I remember was my father turning it on, turning it off, oh, it's too hot, oh, it's too cold, because it was in one place. If they left the door open a little bit, the cold air went and the heat came blaring up. Then they left it closed, it got so hot they couldn't stay in the room.
And then the other big thing too is, the engineering world has completely shifted since a lot of these energy concerns came up. Yeah. I mean, the old way of sizing a boiler was we need 10 million BTUs. We're going to put 12.5 million BTUs
right, oversized it.
And we'll be fine. We'll never have to worry about it. They can open a window if they're hot. And that's it.
Right.
And it was
now
such a
it's
simple,
the opposite.
Yeah. And now it's like, well, no. You need to really pinpoint the size of this boiler. You don't want to use any extra fuel, then you absolutely have to.
Right, no wasted energy.
Exactly. So, I mean, when we're doing these, we're going to, what we try to do is we model the building, so we'll get into every apartment to make up at least one floor, and our goal is to get 3 of those floors. So
we try to make
top,
models.
Bottom, middle. Then we measure every radiator in every apartment. Then we have a whole book, Dan Holohan, which is the heating guru, he has books all over, but one of them is Every Darn Radiator. And it's a wonderful book. It tells you every input rating or output rating of every radiator, and it's spot on. I think we found maybe 1 or 2 radiators that we had trouble finding, and we found something close.
Really?
So then, once you know your radiator sizing, and you know how much heat can actually put out into the building, now every BTU you bring to those radiators that's in excess of what the radiators can put out is wasted fuel.
Really? So when these boilers go, you're usually downsizing.
Oh, almost every time by an insane margin, 25%, 30%. We've seen as low as like 40, and sometimes we'll see 50, and then we really dive into the calcs because we're like, wait, this might be crazy.
The old concept was oversized.
Yeah, put a monster in your basement, you'll never think about it, you'll never worry about it.
You'll always have enough heat and hot water.
Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. I love that. I love that. So so take us through, take us to where we are today. You're running around, you're doing boilers. I know you do some other things, but
so
where do you see the whole energy thing, not even just in boilers, but just in general? Do you think that your business is going to shift to you designing more and more of these split units and working with these landlords to say, hey, I could do this for you, but we need the steel, we need the electricity, we need all of these things. And do they ask you to actually do the return on the investment, to look at it and say, how long is it going to take me to get this back versus my fines? That's a very tricky, slippery road right there, because, I've heard from some developers that say, well, I'd rather pay the $60,000 a year, or the first year it's a few thousand, but it may be cheaper. I can spend $300, but eventually I'll have to get there. But I can't do it now because I just can't afford it.
So a lot of the conversations we've had was essentially asking how much these heat pumps are going to cost the building. And I mean, what we've seen, and I hope it's not the same across the board, but what we've seen is that the installation of the heat pumps with the electrical upgrade, the units, the steel, the refrigerant, the air handle units, all the way throughout the building, is
Controls.
about 3 times the cost of installing your boiler.
Right.
The lifespan is about half, maybe a little bit greater than half, and you're now maintaining the multiple units. And on top of that, there was one other piece. I lost it. But
That's okay.
and electricity costs.
Oh,
Electricity
of course.
costs, running gas, it's about half, maybe a third of the cost that you would be using for the electricity. So when you actually explain this, and this is just what we've been seeing, because we've had some buildings
Right.
reach
If it's
out.
strictly a cost thing, it doesn't make sense.
I don't see it. And then the other option would be, to me, the building envelope would be a much better investment for buildings if they can do it. We've seen buildings that are now essentially sheathing the outside of their building with new insulation, air sealing, new windows. Now what you could do is you could reduce your boiler size to a fraction of what it would be.
Because that technology's gotten so much better.
And so I could see that being a really cool thing, because then now you're making a capital improvement on your building itself.
Correct.
And now you can sell it almost as if this is a modern mission building. And
Versus it being
and
antiquated.
Then it's hard
from an
because-
energy standpoint.
And then that part's hard because then you're still doing a huge capital improvement.
Now, when you file, and I say this to you because I would consider you the subject matter expert, because a lot of the times when we're filing our boilers, right, on these big projects that we do, there's the energy calculations.
Mm-hmm.
Are they, as the applicant of record, as the engineer,
Yep.
Are they getting audited by the building department or by a division? Because I know they have a special energy code division.
That's correct.
Right? And do they come back to you after you filed them to say, hey, your calculations are off, you missed this? Or is it pretty much your firm specializes in it, do the calculations, and make sure that it complies?
Well, so the energy application that we submit, because we have to submit one with every job now.
Exactly.
We haven't had almost any issues on the plan examination, and we have yet to be audited on any job. So,
And it's pretty much a program that you put in all the information and.
so we do it a little bit more old school. So we do tabular analysis based
you
off
do?
of the New York City Energy Code. So we really make sure we know through those codes. We put together the notes, and on every single job, we're going through the efficiencies on the boilers for what their nameplate is. I do think the portion that gets enforced on that end is actually the New York City DEP for the boilers that are above
Right, for
2.8
the
million
emissions.
BTUs. Because on every one of those now, you need to have a DEP inspector, you need to have performance test reports and a test strip showing the combustion analyzer report, showing that they are meeting the combustion analyzer. So on that front, we've seen more on the DEP side of them enforcing it.
So not on the energy side, but really more on the emission side.
Exactly. Our energy reviews, it's relatively straightforward. So the weird thing on a Scotch Marine boiler, for example, that's a tea kettle. That has no efficiency per se.
Just boil the water
It's
and
a
that's
steel
it.
container. Now, the burner is really where have to go. So what's weird about that is that burner's really not going to have an efficiency on it either, because there's all different settings, there's all different inputs, there's all different, and it's really on the contractor to tune and adjust that burner, get the air to fuel ratios proper.
Right. So
and
that
get
it's not burning too rich.
Yes. And then get that combustion analyzer through the back and make sure that's proper.
One of my questions I always have about boilers is I say to myself, when I used to, go to these job sites and I see this boiler going into this chimney, and I say, over the years, the Schedule C never really talked about the chimney. Now it says you've inspected the chimney. Now it got even deeper.
Yeah.
Now the DOB app asks you, in DOB now it asks you specific questions about the chimney. So tell the audience, how do you go in and look at that chimney and feel comfortable? Because as an engineer, if there's a place where there's probably more liability is the carbon monoxide that comes out of the chimney that kills more people than an explosion. That is the truth of the matter. And we've had many instances here in New York City where you hear of people getting sick in a building, and thank God they get out in time, because today we have better technology with carbon monoxide detectors and smoke detectors and all those things. So tell us, when you go to replace this boiler, now you have an obligation that when you put in a new boiler, somebody has to inspect the chimney.
Yes.
So what's the process there? Do you guys slide a camera down there? Do you open it? Do you look at the bottom? Just give us a little bit about that.
So there's guidelines in the NFPA, and I'm extremely strict with chimneys because, well, one, there was a building in Brooklyn, 2 people in the basement. There's something called a spill switch on the draft controller for the boiler. They kept going off, and the tenants,
somebody jams it,
and they turned it off, and they died in their sleep. 2 people died in Brooklyn. I just came from a building earlier today that they had carbon monoxide into one of the apartments, and a kid had to go to the hospital, and thank God the kid's fine. But their carbon monoxide is real, and anybody
it's deadly.
So the way we perform inspections, and I will not sign for anything other than a chimney that we built and smoke tested, but the people who can sign for a chimney are an engineer, an architect, oil burner installer, and a master plumber. And those are the 4 people in the city that can say a chimney's in good condition. The NFPA has 3 levels of inspection, and one is a visual.
But you can't see the inside.
Well, so there should be a clean out door in the basement.
Right at the bottom.
You got to stick a camera up, and
that's what I'm saying.
Oh yeah,
So for the visual part, there's the visual part of the outside, right? You look, see, is the thing cracking? Is it leaning? What's going on?
Correct.
The second part is you open up the door, and then you can send it. Back in the day, we didn't have cameras like that, but today now
a video scan.
Yeah, now we take a video scan. You put it up there, and you can see if the clay is all flaking, if it's clogged, if it's built up, whatever. And then if there's a problem, you as an engineer can decide whether it's passable or it needs to be relined or whatever it may need to be done.
And then the last thing would be a smoke test, which is you seal the bottom, you put a smoke bomb in, seal the bottom, seal the top, and now you see if there's any leaking.
Yeah.
And so this has been a conversation that's been ongoing. So chimneys are probably the only mechanical portion of a building, and it's weird because it's a mechanical portion even though it doesn't have any mechanical components, but it is a exhaust system.
Sure.
That you could have.
And sometimes it could be a couple of 100 feet long.
Oh yeah.
10 stories is 120, 100, 100 feet for the apartments, plus the cellar, plus the over, you're 130, 140 feet in the air.
We have built, a lot of the old ones have terracotta liners.
Right.
And that was the minimum code required. If it's brick, it's no good at all.
Right.
The code says all chimneys shall be lined, period.
That's it.
But if we see a terracotta liner, the thing we tell people is, guys, this is the only thing in your building that's the same age as the building that hasn't been replaced yet.
Right.
Besides maybe your facade, and even that should have been probably repaired. You should line this thing because it's a life safety hazard. All it takes is one terracotta tile of a chimney to fall and collapse, and now people die. and that's it.
So at the end of the day, what's like the cost per square foot to do to reline it?
That's the problem. It's not cheap. I'd say a 6-story building. Let's say you had a 16-inch liner. You're probably looking around like $40,000 to $50,000, and it's unfortunate. They do have different lighting systems. But
like we have an annual boiler inspection.
Yeah.
Is there like a every 5 year, every 10 year that a chimney is supposed to be inspected, or it's only when you replace it?
So there's a checklist item on the annual boiler inspection for the chimney.
Oh, there
But
is.
It actually came up. It never went anywhere. But a few years ago, I was asked to do a report for the city, just asking. The boiler division just said, would you put together just what we would do if we were to inspect the chimney annually? So I did it, and I'm not sure if anything comes of it. You know, a lot of codes have changed.
So
and
on
things
the
like that
annual
now.
report for the boilers, right? They're supposed to, the inspector, whether
Correct.
it's the insurance company or the licensed plumber or the licensed fuel boiler or an engineer, right? Because anybody could do those, right?
Correct.
As long based on not anybody, but
Yeah.
the people that are on the list, obviously. And I know insurance companies can do them, right?
They can.
Is that as part of the annual boiler inspection, they're supposed to check the chimneys as well.
Yeah, I think it's only 2 check boxes, but I think it's similar to almost a Schedule C. I just don't think it's quite the verbiage where it's the
Right, but
chimney's
they're
in
not
good
doing
condition.
they're
But-
not doing smoke tests and they're not
No.
doing cameras. They're just kind of a visual inspection. If it doesn't look right, just let us know.
Yeah, I mean that's been my company policy was that if that terracotta chimney or terracotta line masonry chimney passes a smoke test, that'd be the only time I'd ever be willing to sign it off, and I have yet to see one pass.
You know, it's a funny story. Many years ago, Dominic and I and Sergio, we built a building in the Bronx.
Okay.
And my cousin was the plumber, and licensed plumber in the Bronx for 35 years. These guys came, they finished the building. We get our C of O, we pass all our inspections. And every time we go to the building, like I smelled something. And I'm like, Jimmy, something's not right. No, it's this, it's that, it's something outside. They got the door open, blah, blah, blah. So finally, at one point, he goes, I don't know what to do anymore. You're driving me crazy. I said, listen, my old boss, when I worked at Taggart Associates 40 years ago, used to make me bring this machine that had like an electric motor and a pulley on it, right, Steve? And they would take cinnamon sticks with smoke and put it in, and they would tie it to the pipe. And that was their smoke test. They didn't have the cherry bombs. They actually, and this thing was like this antiquated piece of equipment. But we always laughed when we brought it. But the old timers used to say with the cinnamon in it, what you couldn't see, you could smell. Right? So I tell Jimmy about this and we're laughing, whatever. He goes, all right. I'm just going to go to the fresh air intake. I'm going to put it in there, make sure nobody's in the building on a Saturday, and we'll do the test. And sure enough, all of a sudden we see smoke puffing through somewhere. He goes, oh my God, one of the no-hub clamps was broken.
Oh,
So when
man.
so it was getting some gas once in a while would come out of there through the vent pipe.
Oh, so it didn't open all the way,
It didn't
though.
open
Oh,
all the
okay.
way. But when we realized was we smelled it and we couldn't see it, and then finally once it really started building up, well, the smoke is. It's just like the gas. It'll find the weakest link.
Yes.
And sure enough, it came out, and it was an $8 no-hub fitting on a piece of 4-inch pipe, going to the roof, to the vent through the roof. And there's a perfect example that a simple test like that with a couple of smoke bombs relieved. I don't know how much labor we pumped into trying to find that leak. We just could never find it. So it's always interesting to me how. It sounds easy. Oh, all you're doing is replacing a boiler. But you know what? As an engineer, I know it because this firm has filed thousands of boilers. And I'm sure in your everyday, you're going to go to the biz system and you're going to go in there and you're going to see Design 2147. And we have every one of those boilers on microfilm here in our office. So the first thing I want to tell you is if you ever run across something, you call us up. We can give you all the information that you have on the old boilers. But it's interesting to me how technology is changing and it all sounds great, but there's always pros and cons to everything, right? We talk about, like myself, I have a house up in the country. I got split units. It's the greatest thing in the world. I'm not there. I don't have to worry about my boiler shutting down. I don't have to worry about water. I don't have to worry about leaks. I do it all from my phone. I'm on my way up. I mean, I could put my thermostat up or down, but there's no flue through my building. There's no carbon monoxide. The units are outside. But when they break and you get that $4,000 bill, you're not happy with it. But the convenience of it is something to, there's something to be said for that. But I truly believe that we got a rocky road ahead of us with this local law 97.
Yeah.
Because I think it's going to evolve and it's organic. It's going to move and it's going to shift. And until everybody really dives into it, we're doing a little scratch right now.
I do, and I hope there's more and more conversation about it, because really, I think buildings are ready to push forward, and I think they're really looking for the solution that beats all. I had a bit of a scary conversation about the electrification process, but electrical still has a coefficient for carbon on the benchmarking. So one of the things was that it's projected to go down in the next few years, because I think Con Edison, I believe, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think Con Edison's planning on doing some upgrades to their electrical grid. And I was on a course, and I'm hearing this, and I raised my hand. I said, what if it goes up? And he goes, we're not planning for that. And I go, whoa. Like, what?
Right. So what happens if you're wrong there and it goes in the other direction? We're in big trouble.
And so that's really where the conversation, I think, should lead, is really a confirmation that, listen, if you did electrify, you're good. Like, we will not provide you with the fines. You can't go excessive. You still have to do your benchmark and everything else.
Because you're making a valid point. So I'm a owner of a building, 25,000 square feet or more, residential, and I rip everything out. I go to all electric. 2031 comes. I'm supposed to be below this mark in terms of my efficiency and my
I think it's tons of CO2.
Tons of CO2.
Yeah.
So if you're below it, you don't pay a penalty. If you're above it,
correct,
you pay a penalty. Okay, but Con Ed's bringing me this. If they force that, why am I paying the penalty? I can't control how they're making their electricity.
Yeah, and to me, that's like the scariest conversation you could have. And we're only a year away, right? 2024, I believe, starts.
Yeah, I mean, 2024 is really the beginning of it. The
correct,
teeth of it is 2030.
Correct.
And, like I said, I don't want to speak for, I would never, because it's just opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Today, this is our opinion, because obviously there's no facts to back it.
And it's going to be changing because we're not 100% sure yet.
And this gentleman who's in it every day said he believes that it is going to twist and turn and organically grow and change over the next 6 months. I mean, over the next 6 years. And he felt the same way that you did, Steve, which is at the end of the day, if technology gets better, what I did today may not be good enough. It should be better. But what happens if it isn't?
Yeah.
Right? What happens if I spend all the money today and then I still can't meet it in 2030? Do I wait as we get closer and then dive into it? So I think that a lot of owners are going to be up against some difficult questions.
Yeah.
And I think engineers like yourself are going to have some difficult questions, because you just said it, a minute ago. What happens if Con Ed can't deliver it the way they say they can deliver it and the coefficient is higher? Then what do we do? Well, you just told this owner to go to all electric.
And it's a very scary thing when we're talking with owners. And the only way I can think around that is you lay out everything clearly to that owner so that they understand what you're saying. But yeah, it's going to be a very tough question. And I know I do think it's important to think of real estate as a business, because it is a business.
It is. So people don't buy buildings because they want to lose money.
Exactly.
People buy business because it's for like us. We have buildings. It's not for us, for our kids.
Yeah. And I think it's important to also have not sympathy, but also understand where they're coming from. Was, if the dollars and cents don't add up, then it doesn't make sense for me. This is a venture, or this is a business for me. And if if the amount of money I'm putting into this upgrade is the same as these fines, but I know my system works, I know exactly what my maintenance is, because I know the maintenance for the last 30 years,
right?
And I know my contractor, and I trust my contractor. Now I'm going to a different mechanical contractor who I don't know, through a hole in the wall. I don't know what their maintenance.
Right.
There's so many things.
If I've used this oil company for 30 years and they service me,
always done right by me.
Right, and they come, they repair, they clean, they do. Everything runs great.
Yeah.
Listen. As humans, we don't like the unknown.
Yeah.
And in business, nobody likes the unknown.
Yeah.
We always try to project what the known is.
Correct.
Right? So
the devil you know is better than the one you don't.
Right.
Yeah, it's
so pretty much at the end of every one of our every one of my episodes, I quote a really good friend of mine, Andrew Peters from Curry and Brown, who's a cost estimator, and he was probably the second or third show. And Andrew had a great line. He says, I get paid to project the future cost of things. Mm-hmm. He goes, I got to make the most calculated guess in the world and tell someone, no, you're not going to spend $10 million, you're going to spend $13 million. And he didn't want to spend the $10 million, but you got to tell him it costs 13. So he says, we all look in the rearview mirror, but my job is to look forward. So I always ask our guests at the end of the podcast on our show is, I like you to look into the, not look in the rearview mirror and tell me what happened before, but we look forward. In your industry, and I would say this, I clearly call you without a doubt, a subject matter expert in the boiler world and the energy world. What do you think's going to happen in the next couple of years with the entire boiler industry? Is it going to be, hey, I got no heat, I have no choice, I have to repair this, I have no heat, I have to put another boiler in, and we'll deal with it later? Like, give me kind of like what you're feeling and what doing this now with this Local Law 97 in the background. How do you project it out in the next couple of years?
So the best use case that I can think of, steam is a bit difficult because you can't get to the high efficiencies. But for the buildings that are utilizing water, our push has been, we should very much consider a condensing boiler right now. A condensing boiler should be able to get up to 95 to about 99% efficient with your gas usage. Between that, the monitoring throughout your building, and making sure that you have a balanced system, we should be able to get you below the threshold for the 2024, and we have one building who should be also below the threshold for the 2030.
Wow.
So the advice for them was, they have a conventional boiler system that's hot water right now. And they want to replace, I think, in 2 to 3 years. We said we should replace with condensing now, and you should be prepared to replace it a little bit earlier than you normally would. But by the time you're coming closer to that 2030, to 2050, I think is the major one.
Right.
That's when you take the latest technology and you get it.
Right, because we don't know what technology will be. For all we know is, I hate to say this, but I don't know, but are they going to put electric coils in a boiler and heat the water to,
We've heard talk of it. I haven't seen it yet,
but again, we don't know, right? Who would ever think that we had all these cogens to create electricity and reusing lost energy and recouping it, right? So there's always these things. But what's very interesting about that is that the point you made is that even though we'll be burning a fossil fuel, is there a way to still meet the requirements? And you're saying through technology there is.
Right now,
the problem is that at some point we're not going to burn any of those fossil fuels anymore.
Yeah. So, and the idea would be, and this is the unfortunate part of the news, is that when you start hitting those 230, if I remember correctly, the 2030 to 2050, it's a tiered system, so you'll start getting increased fines as you go.
Right.
And there is a chance you'll start paying some fines during that time where you have your boilers operating. But the cost differential between the electrification versus the boiler will essentially make up for that.
And you made a valid point. What are we doing with landmark buildings? What are we doing with tenants that are not allowing landlords in? It's not just as simple as, I decided I'm going to just bring some electric in and we're going to, just change everything. There's logistics to it. There's timing. There's just, the conversion time. People without hot water. People with hot water. You got to leave one system in place while you're making another. So now you put all this stuff in, what do you do? So you got a pretty rough road ahead of you, kid.
I know I did. And yeah, we're going to roll with the punches and we're going to keep going. But yeah, I'm excited for it.
Absolutely. Well, Steve, you did an incredible job. You've brought a lot of attention to this topic. Thank you for coming in. You're the first one to talk about boilers and stuff, and I think it was really great. You could always find Steve on LinkedIn, New Age Engineering, and thank you for coming in.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. This was a great conversation.
Great.